Good morning, everybody. It's Jeff Goldberg for the Sales Pro Network. It is Friday, February 13th. We're a month and a half into the new year. You better be hustling your butt off because time is ticking, my friends. If you've joined us before, you know I'm a sales coach and trainer. I work with both individuals and organizations to help them get measurable and sustainable sales increases. And if you've joined us before, you know that every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern, I either do a live training or a live interview with somebody who can add value to the profession of sales. And today is no exception, my friends. Today's guest is the founder of Your Sales Recruiter and Sales Performance Team, a fractional sales management company. He's the author of The Ultimate Guide to Managing Your Sales Team and a No BS Guide to Direct Response Marketing and Sales Needle. Please welcome Nick Loise. Hey, Nick.
Jeff, how are you? Good morning. Friday the 13th, but we're not going to let that falter us, or we're going to keep on moving forward and do some truth bombs on all things sales and sales management today.
I am not a superstitious guy. I'm just a happy camper because my fairly old dog went in for oral surgery this week, and he's a pug. And when they have with the pushed-in face, they don't always do well under anesthesia, but he came through it like a champ. So I have no fear of Friday the 13th. We're good to go.
I love hearing that.
Absolutely.
Glad he's doing good. I know you're a good person. I know you're a great person because you're a dog person now.
I like my dog. I like all dogs more than I like most humans, to tell you the truth. Love all dogs. Humans, you never know.
Yeah, right. Just depends on the day and who you're running into. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Nick, I've got 1,000,001 questions for you, but before I get to those, could you maybe give us the 1 to 2, 3 minute version of your background?
Yeah, sure. I appreciate that. So, kind of traditional sales roles, started out right out of college in a cubicle. I was teasing somebody the other day. We had one card system. That's how old I am. If those are listening on live, it was an index card with that. We were buying the manufacturer's guide, right, which was a big book, and then you flip through it and you cold called, and then it became a CD-ROM, and we thought that was the biggest thing in the world. And now, look at the technology we have today. So kind of grew up carrying a bag. Always, knew I was going to be a salesperson. Became a VP of sales, business development. Kind of worked my way up in the corporate world. Got the entrepreneurial bug a couple different times, so I had a couple different. Really positive. All experiences were positive because I learned, but some were really lucrative and some weren't, right, in my entrepreneurial journeys. And if we all have those. In the middle of that, I worked for a large private equity owned company that was in the sales and marketing space, education, as well as execution space. That was a lot of fun because it was in the private equity world to learn a lot, built up a sales team. But I also kind of built the playbook that we're having today at Sales Performance Team. And we learned a lot from working with small to mid-sized business owners. That's all I work with, right? So $1 million in revenue up to about $35 million in revenue. And so that's our journey today. Love it. I'm in Chicago. We talk about Chicago food together. A wonderful wife of 30 plus years and 2 great children who are productive and doing great things in the world. So I think I'm positive on all those things. And for many years, we had a beagle that we rescued that ran the house and ran our lives.
Love it. Love it. And I smiled as soon as you said the one card system. So the little metal box with the 26, A, B, C's.
You betcha. I used to hold it on my desk. Nowadays we're virtual, right? So I don't have one, but I hold it on my desk so that when the sales guys couldn't update their CRM, I'm like, listen, I grew up on this where we were writing stuff on index cards. So just update the CRM.
It's so funny, Nick. There's a talk I do when I'm teaching sales managers how to manage about sometimes you got to give a Captain Kirk speech. Yeah. And, half the time they don't know who Captain Kirk is, or they don't know who I'm talking about, which is the original Captain Kirk. And I also give an example of, sometimes when you're networking, you need people to open up their mental Rolodex. And you say you had the file. I still have a Rolodex.
I love
Not
that.
I use it, but just so that I can show this. This is what we used to do before we had phones.
Absolutely, love the Rolodex, and I think I have it on one of my bookshelves behind me. As you can see, I'm a bibliophile. But I had Harvey Mackay wrote a book about Rolodexes, right, and the power of that, and the Mackay 66, and listen. It's still a people-to-people business, and you gotta
fill your Rolodex before you need it, or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I remember. Absolutely. I love that book. That was a great book. Absolutely brilliant. So I want to talk to you about salespeople. Salespeople are quite often what I'll call a lone wolf. They're prospecting and selling on a regular basis. They're just trying to get the job done, not always doing it well, but they're trying their best on a daily basis. So you train sales managers and you offer outsourced or fractional sales management. Why do salespeople need a sales manager at all?
Well, I think, you and I talked about sports and when we were first getting to know each other before this event, right? Every great professional has this as a coach, right? And I think of a really good sales manager as a sales coach, but maybe has a organizational view where sometimes sales coaches come in and are just execution on, opening, right? Or networking or closing or doing good discovery. The sales manager has the entire view. So think of him almost like the general manager of the sales team. And really you focus on helping, looking at the blind spots, right? Before you and I got on this call, I was just doing a reference check on somebody we're going to hire for one of our clients. And I said, well, what would you coach him on? And he said, that's a great question. Every salesperson's good. He was really good, but there was some nuances, right? And some of the so that's what we do as sales managers is we work through the nuances as well as we bring best practices, right? Because we see a lot of different things. And sometimes because salespeople are lone wolves, they want to do it themselves. But there's nothing worse than being a lonely soldier, right? You need that person there. Also, as a sales manager, we got to work on their heart, their head, and their skills, right? Because we sometimes get in our head a lot. And so you kind of have to work on that. Personal development, though it's cringy for some people because it's done wrong, you do need that as a sales coach and a sales manager. You got to spend time what's going on up here with them, what's going on in their heart, where they're at, as well as just their personal lives. And so I think we take a holistic approach to our sales coaching and our sales leadership, but really it's somebody to kind of drive the team forward, if you will.
Yeah, I've said this many times before, but my belief is that the only sales rep that does not need an effective sales leader is a superstar. And most sales people are simply not superstars. You hire a Nick or you hire a Jeff. Right. I mean, the best thing anybody, if either of us was looking for a sales job, which of course I'm not, and I hope you're not either, but if you hire one of us, the best thing somebody could do is say, here's your leads, go get them and leave us alone. Maybe we show up for a sales meeting now and then, but just let me go do my thing because I've got 50 years experience. I'm guessing yours is fairly similar, but most salespeople don't have that much experience. And even ones that have years and years, decades of experience often are just getting by. I call them plodders, PLOD. They plod along. Maybe once in a while they'll hit their monthly quota, but not typically. And they're just getting by, but they have nothing else to do in their life, so they stick with it. But an effective sales leader can take that plodder and maybe not make them a superstar, but they can help them get the most out of what they do. Am I wrong?
I think you're spot on with that, Jeff. I think it's a great analogy. And I think working with small to mid-sized businesses, which is where we do, sometimes you can't afford the superstar, right? They're just too expensive. They come with, the demands, they come with the base, they're used to earning at a high level and your organization just can't afford it from a cash flow perspective. So
and they're hard to manage.
They're hard to manage. And so you need to take those B and C players and move them up and up level them up. And if they've got the raw talent, right, you just keep on with them and just managing them along. But I do agree with you. It's always interesting to me. I know sales, it's got the highest turnover rate of new hires, right? More so than any other role and responsibility. And there's so many people that are in it, and they just they're just not mission matched with it, but they're also not skill set or emotionally EQ matched with it. And that's our roles as sales leaders and sales managers. One is if you got somebody, level them up, right? And if you can't level them up, do everybody a favor and level them out, right? Just and do it professionally and do it with respect and dignity. But it's going to make their lives better, and it's going to make you and the organization better.
I could not agree more. So often people wind up in sales simply because they have nothing else to do. I did.
Yeah.
My father, my stepfather, and both grandfathers were career salespeople who never made a penny. And I swore I will never, under any circumstances, go into sales. It's a long story how it happened, and I'm not going to waste the time now. But 50 years later, I'm not only still selling, I'm teaching other people how to sell. The difference is, I believe, I don't think it's that I had natural talent, although I was born with some of the characteristics that tend to make you more likely to succeed. But for me, I believe the success came because I studied sales. Once I got into it, I said, okay, if this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to do it the best way I possibly can. So I still read, it looks like you do too, every book that comes out, and I still go to seminars, and it's a career, not a job for me. And I think so many people, they fall into it by accident. They got nothing else to do, nowhere else to go. So they just stick around, even though they're not really taking advantage of the opportunity that sales gives a college dropout like me to earn well over 6 figures a year. Is that what you find, Nick?
I think you're spot on with that. I think you hit something on too. If I think about my past, right, I viewed it as a profession from day one, right? So I'm going to date myself again. I had the one card, but I also was a religious listener to anything that Nightingale Conant put out, right? So you had the Zig Ziglar, and you had Brian Tracy, and you had Tony Hopkins or Anthony Hopkins at that time, right? Those were kind of some of the folks that we grew up with, and then kept on evolving. But I was a field salesperson, right? I was in the field. Nowadays it's field, or a lot of times it's inside sales, but I was listening to stuff in the car. And I agree with you. I still got my original Secrets of Closing the Sale underlined and highlighted. And then anytime my sales manager, right, or the general manager of the division, who is a salesperson, mentioned a book, I went out and got it, right? And I went to seminars. And even sometimes, it was some of it's for the emotional juice that we need, right? Zig was great about that and all that. But there was really good information. Nowadays, it's, you could get it at a click of the dial on YouTube, or a phenomenal podcast like this with two pros talking about sales. But you have to view it as a profession. And I also think something too is listen to people like Jeff, right? People that have got that skill and have taken through the BS filter. There's a lot of really bad information out there too, right? And so you need that person that has that holistic, long view. I mean, I think Earl Nightingale would cringe at the amount of people that are flexing in front of fake Rolexes and Lambos that they rented by the hour, and Airbnbs that they rented that they're taking pictures. And I got a lot of people that are standing in front of private jets. I never see them on the jet, but they're always standing in front of it. And so I think right now it's the nature of the society that we're in. But it's like, find the pro, find people like Jeff, and he's got a great Facebook community. So if you're listening to this and you haven't joined it, you're leaving stuff on the table. So go ahead and join it. But just get around other people and learn. But I also think you could, not only the sales books, and I'm sure you go deep on, the emotional, right, the psychological things, the deal books, the negotiation books, and just being curious. I think, I'm a big Ted Lasso fan, right? It was the right time for all of us at the right, we needed it during COVID, that phenomenal thing. But it was be curious, not judgmental. And I think one of the things that we always say is ABC, always be closing, but ABC, always be curious, right? And so really understand people. And I think that just comes innate, right? You had that, even though you said, hey, I didn't want to do it. Not saying that your uncles and your father and everybody else didn't. I had an uncle that was a phenomenal salesperson, probably was one of the first, not really role models, because my father was a good role model for me, but I learned from him, and he would take me out as a young man and get me dressed up in a suit, and I would go, and he had I'm in Chicago, he had Wisconsin and Minnesota, right? So we would drive and go on his counts, and I said, well, what's the secret to this? He's like, make the calls and talk to the people. And he said, also stay out of the bar, right? Because you would be, they would all go, at those days, they would all be in the same hotels. He goes, you'd pull in, you'd see a guy sitting at the bar at, 9:00 in the morning, and you come back and he'd still be there, and you knew he didn't make a call, right? So you got to make the calls. And I don't know why, people are people, right? No one, I never heard of a sale, maybe they have been, but a salesperson ever getting shot for cold calling, right? Or yelled at, you get yelled at, sure, but that person's probably going through some stuff, and just it's just dealing with the probabilities and the numbers of this business.
Yeah. First of all, you mentioned Tommy Hopkins. The very first sales training I took in person with Tommy 49 years ago, the very first training I ever had. Brilliant. Bought, what was his book, How to Master the Art of Selling. I used any sales organization I ever managed, I always bought a carton of those books, and everybody had to read it.
Yeah.
It's a little dated now. There's still some stuff that doesn't quite work anymore, but it was brilliant back then. And I pointed to my nose, like, spot on. You make the call. It's like, what's the worst that could happen? I did a gig with another trainer. It was actually her gig, but it was for Verizon Wireless, the stores all over the Northeast. And for some reason, Verizon Wireless insisted that she have a male trainer with me. And she said, would you like to do this gig with me? I'm like, yeah, okay. But here's the point of the story. I forgot what her title was, but the woman who ran the entire Northeast for Verizon Wireless would introduce us in front of every group, because we were teaching them cold calling.
Okay.
And she would always tell the same story. What's the worst that can happen if you make a call? Do you think you're going to go out at lunch and be stopping for gas somewhere, and as you're filling your car with gas, somebody pulls up to the pump right across from you, and you say hello, and they say hello, and they go, wait a minute, I recognize your voice. Are you the idiot who cold called me this morning? And of course, everybody goes, ha, 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 because that doesn't happen. The worst that happens is somebody yells at you or says something nasty and hangs up. I think you'll like this, and then I want to move on. But a VP of sales that I did a lot of work for at various companies, every time he moved, at one point he taught me this, the acronym SW, SW, SWN.
Okay.
SW, SW, SWN, which stands for some will, some won't, so what, next. So why do so many businesses struggle when it comes to managing salespeople? What are the challenges of managing salespeople, and why do so many organizations get it wrong?
Yeah, so there's a couple of reasons for that. The first reason for that is that they do what I call the kiss of death, which is they take the best performing salesperson and transfer them up to a sales manager or sales leader. And they didn't realize that being a great salesperson that you and I talked about, well, there's certain demographic, psychographic motivators, drivers that makes you a great salesperson that actually is counterintuitive to being a great sales manager, right? So that's the first thing that they fail at. And now we have to come in and unwind this. And now you've got, how do you make sure you keep the ego intact of the sales, the great sales professional, get them back into a production role.
And you lost your best salesperson now.
And you lost your best salesperson, so that you're doing that, right? And it was kind of funny, and I'll keep on going but I'll tell a quick story because we all learned by stories, right, since the beginning of time. I was just at a client event, and I was sitting, and they did tabletop education. And it was during their reception in an hour. And one of them was in sales management. I sat at that table, we're talking, two young guys came up to me and they're like, with a list of questions. So I applaud them as young sales managers. We talked about it. I said, listen, sales management's the hardest job in the world. They said, oh yeah. And I said, and you were salespeople, weren't you? He said, yeah. And I said, and you probably made more money as a salesperson than you did as a sales manager. Like, oh my God, so much more. And you probably were happier. Yes. Why are you doing it? And so, so it goes back to that. Two is the founder of the organization or the business owners trying to manage sales. And that never works. One is they have to think about strategic things, right? They should be focusing on operational things. They should be working on really high level stuff, not sales management, which, sometimes could be draining emotionally. And so what they do is they do it as a drive-by, right? Or their thoughts about managing salespeople is make more dials and close more deals, right? And that I've managed them.
What are you closing today? What are you closing today?
Yeah, right. And you see that with founders. We kind of have to act as a buffer for founders sometimes. So that's another thing. And then third thing is, much like sales is a science and an art, sales management and sales leadership certainly is a science and an art. And so you need to focus on the art of it and the science of it. And you have to be intrinsically motivated to, one is keep on driving an organizational forward and a team forward, but also you get your motivation from lifting people up, right? You smiled when you talked about, I took over as a sales leader, right? And, I had a great sales leader, but I took over teams, and you get intrinsically motivated from mentoring people. And I think that to me is, I'm sure you do too. I get LinkedIn messages from guys. Hey, listen, you took a chance on me and, you coached me through some hard times. I'm doing great. Here I am in my sales career. Or another guy, he started out as a junior salesperson for us. Now they call it SDRs, right? And I got a family. I've got two kids, one more on the way. And, I would never have had this great career if it wasn't for you taking a chance on me. And it's not just that, it's you take over organizations and maybe there's people that are floundering and failing and you coach them up to success. And that's the fun part too. And that's the rewards that we get.
Yeah. I think one of the things that made me an effective sales leader was I truly love handing out big checks. Yeah. I love helping people. It's one of the great things about what you and I do for a living. Yep. I love knowing that I help people feed their families.
Yep.
And like you, I do get those emails and calls and texts. I tried that thing you taught me and I closed the deal that I would never sell.
You love that. Yeah.
I think one of the things that makes me good at selling is I truly love to serve. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I like getting paid for serving, but I love to serve. And it's the same thing as a sales manager. And I think one of the other things that screws people up as sales managers, so you get promoted and you said it, You think you're going to make more money and work less hard. Ha ha ha. You're going to make less money and work harder. But the thing is, now you lost your best salesperson, and they never train that person to be a manager. And
Right.
you said it, selling and managing are two different things. Just because you're great at selling does not, in fact, I think they're almost opposites.
I agree. I think you're spot on with that. And I use the analogy on Friday they got promoted to sales leader. On Monday, the only thing that happened is it's the weekend, right? They have no skills, nothing's changed. They don't have the here's what it is. Now, there are people that kind of then force themselves to learn and they become great at it, right? So I don't want to paint it with a broad brush, but for the most part, we see the mistakes that are made, and we have to kind of clean up the mistakes that are made in our organization's role.
So what are some of the characteristics of a great sales leader? Obviously, being a servant leader, wanting to help others. What else do you need to be if you're going to be effective as a sales leader?
So I think you have to be very process oriented and look for the constraints, right? There's a constraint in every deal and there's a constraint in every sales process. And so you said, hey, listen, Tommy Hopkins, right? One of the things about him is he broke it down to a sales process. He told great stories and he was great on stage, and the book is very entertaining, but he broke it down into a sales process. And even if you go back and listen to Zig, there was a sales process that they went through. And so nowadays, listen, discovery. We just make it fancy medic or whatever you want to call it. But there's a process that you have to do. So you as a sales leader have to kind of figure out, what does that sales process look like? And how do I kind of solve for X, right? Which is, where's the constraint in the sales process? Is it that we're doing a bunch of discoveries and nothing's closing? Is it that we're doing a bunch of sending a bunch of proposals out and there's nothing's closing? You just got to figure that out. The second thing you have to deal with is, I think you have to be holistic as to what's going on in the marketplace. And then, because sometimes salespeople will just come back and say, well, nobody's buying. Well, yeah, there's segments that are buying. We just aren't focused on those segments. So let's constantly be updating our ideal customer profile, right? ICP, right? Or target, avatar, whatever phraseology you and your marketing team use. But I think you have to constantly adjust that. And when we come into organizations, we have to push and say, hey, listen, you're going after people that don't have any ability to pay. And now it's even tighter with the economic constraints that are going on. We have to find new ICPs, right? You have to find new products or target markets, we would call it, or different things to go through. And I think as the sales leader, you have to kind of lead that charge. The third thing is, I think you have to kind of stir the pot and always be looking for what's working and get those best practices to the team, and also what's not working and get them out of play. Third, obviously you create the playbook, right? So what's the playbook? You create the measurement tools or the KPIs or the scoreboards, right? Or the whiteboards. They're all things that we have all the time. And then you also have to do what the nuts and bolts of management, even if it's sales management or just as manager, the one-on-ones, right? Understanding who they are and what's motivating them and how you could help them get to that, motivating them up, right? Or motivating them out if they're not working out, and just kind of working on the team. And I think one of the things that probably you and I grew up with, having great sales managers and leaders, and then becoming great sales managers and leaders, right? And that's not ego. That's just a statement of fact, folks. Is that we also learned we sat in the car with them. We drove around with them. We had windshield time with them. And you have to start doing more of that. And I think many managers and leaders become CRM jockeys, right? You're just looking at deals versus saying, hey, let's get in the field and let's have some conversations. And you learn more about that drive to and from the prospect about your person than you'll ever will in a one-on-one with them. Right. And just so you can also hear what's going on in the marketplace. I do think that you, as the sales leader, need to get out from behind the desk, from behind the CRM, and do that time. And that's when you do that real one-on-one talking, right? Of just saying, hey, listen, I noticed that, you're stepping over the client when you're doing discovery and you're rushing to answer them versus just pausing, right? In the old days in-house, we could hit the pause button on them and say, stop, let them talk, but now, so I think you need that. And I do think that there's a generation of sellers that aren't getting mentored, and I think that's part of the great work that you're doing, Jeff. And how do we mentor them up? And I think we feel that obligation, right? Just like, professional, like physicians had to, we mentor the residents, right? I think we need to create, our job is to mentor them up. So long answer to a short question.
No, it's good. I think the other thing you mentioned CRM jockeys, and you're absolutely right. The other thing is stop managing by email. Go talk to your people.
Yeah.
Management is a hands-on walk around.
Yeah.
And you keep saying stuff that hits my brain. I'm like, up until COVID, I even offered that on an outsource basis. I go into the field and ride with salespeople and just coach them afterwards, which a lot of fun for me, not so much fun for them because, but it's a great way to learn. And of course, it was fun because I make it fun, and I know how to coach people. It's not just beating people up, but you miss that windshield time, and you miss the getting to know them and really understanding what makes them tick and having those one-on-one heartfelt conversations. I think the other thing that is important for a sales manager is they have to be willing to accept responsibility, because as far as I'm concerned, when I do fractional sales management, we'll talk about that in a moment. It's not the sales team that upper management should be going to. I'm 100% responsible for sales, and it's my job, or any sales manager's job, to get the job done through their people. But if you're not going to be willing to accept responsibility, you should not be a sales manager. And you also have to be willing, and I think this is crucial, you got to be willing to hold people accountable.
Yeah. And I don't know why it's tough. It's tough for all roles, but it seems in sales, one is, some of it is salespeople cause that, right? Because of the fact that they always have that big deal. And we are optimists, right? So you're like, oh, wait, we can't get rid of them because that big deal is going to be coming in, right? And so, but the big deal never comes in, right? And if you look at it, it's not there. So I agree with you. There is, that level of accountability. And listen, we start talking about, great coaches. We talked about sports, not to use the sports metaphor for everything, but great players want to be held accountable, right? The top performers want to grow and they want to be held accountable. There is the lone wolf, right, of the great salesperson that just wants to be left alone. I do challenge that a little bit. I do think that there's something that he or she might want, whether it's just to edify them in front of their peers, right? Lift them up, just say, hey, listen, Mike's been doing a great job. I was with him on a ride along just to kind of, learn some of the things he's doing. And I'm going to be sharing those things with you, right? So there's things you could do because everybody has some level of ego. But yeah, I agree with that.
Yep. Now, I mentioned it a moment ago, and you and I both do it, so we know what it is. But for those who don't know, what is a fractional sales manager?
Oh, sure.
When does an organization need a fractional sales manager as opposed to a full-time in-house sales leader?
Yeah, so usually it's the FTE count or full-time equivalent count. So how many salespeople that you have. So a fractional sales leader is a sales leader that's within the organization for not 40 hours a week, but just a fraction of that time. Right. So that could be that they're in it for 3 hours a week or 4 hours a week or 10 or whatever that is. And that fraction of time is really allocated between how many salespeople they have, as well as how much the organization could afford to buy the time of a really high level sales professional and sales leader. And so what we do is we work with, and we have people that we put into organizations that work as their fractional sales leader, if you will. Right now, our goal, and I'm sure it's your goal too, is to get them so big that they have, a need for a full-time sales manager. And so we'll help them find the sales manager. Then we move up almost to a fractional CSO, if you will, chief sales officer or VP of sales, and then become more strategic, right? So a sales manager is think of it like the not the general creating the strategic plan, but the person on in the field with the troops, right? So kind of moving deals along and coaching people up and things of that nature. If you go back to sports, it will be not the head coach, but it might be the offensive line coach, right? Or the quarterback coach. And that's what you have to focus on and really focus on doing. And so as a fractional sales leader, we're in the organization based on how many hours that we agree on. And it's really based on the count, right? So how many FTEs do they have, and how do I make sure that we're giving everybody the appropriate amount of time?
Yep. To me, I have not had one fractional sales management engagement where they had to say, okay, Jeff, we're going to bring on a full-time sales manager. I've always gone to them and said, you know what? I believe I've done everything I can for your team. We've built them up to X. I think it's time for me to help you bring on a sales leader full-time, because you need that at this point. And I'm betting like you. I typically get offered that job, which I don't want. If I wanted a full-time job, I would take one. But I love what I do. But nobody ever had to tell me, Jeff, we're going to bring on a full-time sales manager. I go to them and say, look, I've done everything I can. Let's bring somebody on and I'll actually help them, which they're always like, well, you're working against your own interests. You're going to be out of a gig. That's okay. Because the thing to me that blows my mind is that the simplest thing that salespeople don't seem to understand. I'm never worried about losing a gig because I've always got prospects waiting for me. Because to me, consistent and effective prospecting is one of the true keys of sales success. You could almost suck at selling, but if you're seeing enough prospects, you're going to close some. And of course, sucking at selling is not a great recipe for making a lot of money and being financially secure. But it almost always boils down to you're just not seeing enough people.
I think you're spot on, and I think there's a lot of that in the probably the professional environment that we're in too, in like the fractional environment. That's not what we're going to talk about, but I do think that studies do show this. And I think there's a great study out of Harvard that the more that you have in the pipeline, higher closing rates will be. Right? There's just something psychological about that.
Yeah.
And it's that, so some will, some won't, so what, right? Next. And I think there's that philosophy. And what you see too, when you're kind of dealing with struggling salespeople, is they just don't have anything in their pipeline. And they're struggling with deals, right? And the deals probably should have been DQ'd, right? Disqualified a long time ago, but they keep them in the pipeline and they keep touching them and keep emailing and keep talking about them. And I'm all for white whales, right? I'm all for having really, really big deals that you're hunting. That keeps it fun, right? We all love that. But I think it's just that meticulousness to filling that pipeline each and every day. And I've never seen a sales organization have people flounder if they're doing that every day. If they block an hour a day or 2 half-hour increments, whatever you could do. And I'm not talking about, commenting on people and, just really a strategic prospecting approach, whether it's calling, emailing, LinkedIn direct messaging, or I prefer all three, or sending, just doing the right things to people. If you're out in the field doing drive-bys and and door knocking and door pulls and all that stuff that we used to do. And I think, those that do it, that's the key, right? That's key. And there's so many great tools now there to give you so much information. I mean, it's just so different than what we had to deal with,
Yeah. And when that pipeline doesn't have enough stuff, they do hang on to every deal. You probably heard this phrase too. They're smoking hopium. They're hoping the deal comes through. They're not prospecting enough, so they need everything to come through. And I don't care how good you are at selling. Nobody closes 100%. And I'm betting like me, you've had a lot of people tell you, "Oh yeah, I close 100%." Well, really? Then what am I doing here?
It's usually the founder.
If you close 100%, I should take your class.
Yeah. It's usually the founder that says they close 100%. You can't challenge that. But you have to say, okay,
I have yet to have a salesperson, when they tell me they close 100%, be able to show me.
Correct.
Great. Show me. Show me that you're closing 100%. Because I love saying this. I'm so good at selling that people pay me to teach them how to sell, and I don't close 100% in class. In fact, well, with coaching, I close more than 50%, but with sales training, it's less than 50%. It's 42%.
Yeah.
Now that's a high number, and I should be doing it because I'm an expert, but it still means more than half the people I speak to say no.
Yeah.
It's just part of the deal. You brought this up a moment ago, and I want to get onto that because I think it's so crucial. To me, one of the most valuable things that a sales manager can do is do a pipeline review. And what do managers get wrong about pipeline reviews, and what should they be doing?
So I think the first thing they get wrong is they don't go deep enough, and they fall for the hopium, right? They fall for that. And there's a great book by this. Actually, a client turned me on to. It's called The Qualified Sales Leader by John McMahon, and it focuses on how to go. And the beginning starts out with a story, right? We all like stories, and it starts out with him sitting in a consulting client's pipeline review, and he's like, "Oh, this is going to be a nightmare," right? Because the sales managers weren't asking deeping questions, qualifying questions, and you just take the salesperson's data that they're giving to you as fact versus going one question deep, 2 questions deep, 3 questions deep. And it's interesting to me, and I just thought about this when you asked that question, when I was, we were doing our thought, and I'm like, oh, that's a great question. We would never allow ourselves and our team to be surface level in discovery. but we are surface level in discovery when we're doing pipeline reviews, right? So it's really asking those appropriate questions, really seeing if they're multi-threading and multi-weaving, and is the person that they have has their contact. If it's an enterprise, event, is it a cheerleader? Is it a coach? Is it a decision maker? Right? All the appropriate questions that you should be asking. Do they have pain? Right? Even as surface level as BANT, do they have budget, authority, need, and timeline? Right? And just something like that. And sometimes we don't ask those questions because we want to hear that these deals are going to close, and we want to say, okay, let's move on because I got 52 problems, right? And so if you're okay, yeah, good, move. You're going to hit quota. Yes. And then it turns out nobody hits quota. Right. And so there's this nuance that we have, and it's just, let's just go deep, right? Let's be okay. And let's learn as an organization. I like pipeline reviews with the team, not to single people out, but everybody can learn from the questions, and it will make the team better and hopefully, lift all boats.
Absolutely. And the only time I do a one-on-one pipeline review is if I really have to beat somebody up.
You never do that.
Right?
Yeah,
I don't ever want to do that.
Spot on.
There's great value in having the team around because to me, the most important thing of a pipeline review is what are you going to do next? What's your plan? And maybe I have a different opinion, but if I've got 4, 5, 6 other people, there's a lot of opportunity to give an idea that the person who's actually running this deal hadn't thought of, because we can think outside their box. And, as you were speaking, I thought, which is absolutely true. Anytime I'm doing a pipeline review and I hear the sales rep say, I hope to close this, I know we're screwed.
Yep.
I know if you hope to close it, you probably aren't gonna. You either got to know this is going to close or it's not. We never know until they actually sign on the dotted line. I get that, but hope it ain't working for me. What about hiring? Because that's a big problem in a lot of companies. They don't know what to look for in a salesperson. And you actually have a division of your company called Your Sales Recruiter, and you help companies hire top sales talent. So what do you look for in a salesperson when you're hiring?
So it depends on the role, right? Is it a pure hunter role, or is it a account executive role, which is going to be a hunter and a farmer, right? So
I want to hear about hunters. I love hunters.
Okay. So we'll just talk about a hunter role, right? So I want to see, one is, have they had success? So there's the psychographic things that I'm looking for, right? Executive presence, if they're selling to the C-suite. Do they have the ability to articulate, right? Can they present a case? Do they use all the tools in their toolbox? When I'm interviewing them, I'm asking them questions, and are they fact-based, right? Like you just pointed out, or are they, kind of fluffy answers? So we get very specific about, tell me about how they approach. Do they think strategically about the acquisition of new logos in a hunter role? Then I'm looking for, what's their internal motivation and drives, right? So we use outside third-party testing for that. It could be as easy as DISC-TTI. We have a grid test that, feel free to have your people take. It's on our website, Your Sales Recruiter. We'll send you the results. It's from Angela Duckworth's book, but we built a little more intelligence around selling for us, as well as there's Sales Hunter, and OMG has some really good diagnostic tools, right? So now I could get to let's not use my biasness as a sales leader or a founder and say, I like this person, he's giving me all the right answers. But really, do they know how to sell? Can they sell? Will they be successful here? The other thing that I always look at, Jeff, is I look at the organization and the selling environment and the person. And what I mean by that is, I have never seen really good success come from hiring a salesperson from a large organization and putting them into a sales role in a smaller organization, right? It just doesn't work, because many times they're used to using the logo that they're selling for, Microsoft, Google, whatever, Salesforce, to open the door. Well, a startup, right, or a small organization, you have to be crafty, right? You have to just be thinking through. We had a client that called and hired us just out of desperation, because I got 3 guys, I hired them all out of Google, and they can't sell for me. And he was a digital agency. I said, sure. That's because no one ever sold Google. Everybody buys Google at the time, right? Because they're used to using that logo. So they just didn't know how to to craft a compelling buying journey for the prospect and compelling buying, a proposal, right? And so we had to work with them and get more aggressive hunters. So one is know your role, right? Know the demographics that you want for the role, the psychographics, the internal motivations, the intrinsic motivations. Do they have this skill? Will they be successful here with us, or will they not be successful here with us? And then you run them through a battery of tests. And I think that's it at a high level.
Yep. As a consultant, I've worked with lots of clients where I actually watch them doing an interview, and it's all I can do to.
Yeah, you almost want to cringe. You want to stop it. Yeah.
It's like, are you kidding me? I don't care what a salesperson, what their spirit animal is. I don't. Yeah. I'm into woo-woo, but not with salespeople. I don't care if they can figure out how many manhole covers there are in San Francisco. Yeah. All I care about is one thing: how the heck are you going to sell? So one thing I always ask is, hey, Nick, let's say you join the company and you walk in on Monday, your first day, and I have no leads for you whatsoever. I hand you a phone and I say, go get them, kid. How are you going to go find people? Now, they don't have to give me an exact plan, but I want to hear the way they think. Yeah. If somebody says, gee, I don't know, I was hoping you were going to tell me, you're not a hunter. But right. If they say, well, the first thing I would do is I'd ask you, tell me about our current clients. Who are they? And, can I put together a prospecting plan based on, I'll be going to LinkedIn and looking for them, and I'll buy a list from Zoom Info or something like. I just want to hear that they can think, because if you can't think, you can't sell. And the other thing I make them do is sell me. So if you make it through the first interview with me, it's going to end like this. Hey, Nick, I want to do another interview with you, but on the next interview, we're going to actually role play a sale, not my product. I want you to sell me whatever you're selling right now. And from the very start of the meeting, it's no, hi, how you doing? It's like, it's a sales call.
Yeah, so, I love that.
And no break, no timeouts. At the end, I'll know you're ready to talk when you say, thanks so much for your time today. And then we can talk about the job. But I just want you to treat it as a sales call, because if they can't do that, how are they going to sell my product?
We do that all the time. We love that. And they always try to sell your product, and you were spot on. Don't let them do that. They're going to fumble. They don't know it. You can't tell
what you already know.
Yeah. Sell what you're selling, or sell something you had a lot of success in the past. And I think that will show you just internally, do they have the moxie to sell, right? Do they have a system and a process, and are they going through it? Even if it needs to be tweaked, do they have that moxie?
Yep. So unless an organization, which I find many don't, unless they have a very well-developed marketing effort that brings in high-quality leads on a regular basis, it's typically up to the salesperson themselves to prospect for their own business. What advice do you have to today's sellers for putting together a prospecting playbook, and what's actually working today in getting appointments with decision makers? Because my experience is, for most salespeople, they're just not seeing enough, and it's they don't know how, and they're afraid to do it. So what is working?
Well, Jeff, you said a couple things really fast that are spot on, right? So you got to create a list, right? You have to create who are we selling to, right? What's their pain? What does that look like? Ideal customer profile. We talked a little bit about that. Once I have that, now I'm going to go to LinkedIn. I'm going to go to Zoom Info. I'm going to go to, there's so many great tools that are out there that will help me find the people that I need to do. So now I've created a target account list, right? Or a TAM, right? So now I've got 1,000 leads or 250 leads or whatever that is. Some of it may be provided by the organization. Some of it I may have to go kind of self-source, which is fine. Now I have to figure out who in there has the ability either to get me to the buyer or is the buyer. Right. So who's the key decision maker? LinkedIn Sales Navigator is a phenomenal place for that. So I now have the list. I have the tool, right? Maybe I've cleaned up the list a little bit. I've enriched the data, in technical terms. And now I'm going out and I'm reaching out to them. The error, you could get everybody's cell phone nowadays, right? And I could get everybody, they're telephone off. So I have an email. I'm reaching out to them vis-a-vis email with compelling messages, not want to buy, but very compelling messages, which is a whole podcast on itself, but we're going to have to grow after that. I've got a phone, and I probably got 2 different phone numbers. So I'm going to be reaching out to them there, even if it's just marketing. Hey, I just sent you an email, don't have to listen to this voicemail. Take a look at that email. I've got LinkedIn, and I could send LinkedIn connection requests, and I could send them an email and in mail or through Sales Navigator. we are seeing higher response rates from the LinkedIn inbox versus email inboxes right now, right? So but that will change over time. Phone is still, the number one, right? I get excited as I'm sitting up a little bit, right? So you got to use the phone. Don't be afraid of the phone, and it has to be just a compelling message.
Yeah.
And then we're going to put them through a cadence, right? A cadence is how many touches am I going to do with that person? And then we're going to be, if my company is great enough to have some tools for me, we're going to be sharing those tools with people. But I got to get to people with a compelling message for them to have. I got to find out if they have pain, right? So therefore, I got to get them on a discovery call, and therefore I can see if they have budget, authority, need, and timeline. And I have to, hopefully I could find some people that are actively looking for what I'm providing, right? 3% of the 100 people that I possibly have might be looking for the solution. If not, I have to manufacture that need. I have to manufacture that demand. And so that's, it's not for the faint of heart, right? But that's it down and dirty. If you think about it, you've got 3 to 4 vehicles to touch them. You got the phone, you have their cell phone and their business phone, you have their email, as well as you have LinkedIn messaging. If they're active on different social medias, I might find out and try to either use that as data intelligence, but also think about reaching out that way, right? If they're active users on LinkedIn, I'm going to like and comment on their posts, right? And so and then you build a map. You build a map and you build a cadence, and you just have to execute it.
Yeah, I'm with you. A multi-pronged approach. I call it a blended approach to prospecting.
Sure.
I don't find any one thing is working better than everything else today. Cold calls. Look, I built my business on cold calling, but that was 20 years ago, and it's much harder to get through to people today. That's just a fact. But I still think a cold call and, like you said, email, LinkedIn, here's what I love: direct mail. Because almost nobody.
I think direct mail is good if you could afford it, right? And you have a compelling. And nowadays, I love direct mail. You're selling it's easier when you're going to small businesses because the business owner is there, right? But if you're, corporations, people might be working from home, right? So you got to think about, what's that there? Lump email, right? Getting them a book is good. Getting them something that they tangentially could touch, they'll remember when you said that. If a trade show makes sense or a conference makes sense, I want to be there, even if I got to go on my own dime, right? And just work the room and talk to people and hear what's going on in the bar talk and the bathroom talk and the the coffee line talk. So I mean, now we're getting nuanced right now. But if I was if I was a field sales rep and I had a territory, I'm knocking on doors, right? If I can knock on doors, I'm knocking on doors. And you'd be surprised on how many people would be more than happy to give you the information that you're looking for if you're just polite and just follow a very simple script. And so now we've given them, I think, 7 ways to kind of fill their pipeline. And you've said it so many times, and it's just gold that you're giving everybody today on this call, Jeff, is you got to do it. Right.
Yeah,
it's
no
sure
choice.
knowing it is easy, right? But doing it is hard, and you have to do it. And many of us don't.
Yep. And personally, the first thing I do with a coaching client is say, great, let's look at your calendar.
Yeah.
Let's look at your calendar. And here's one thing I never see: prospecting time.
Yep.
To me, it's the most important thing a sales rep can do every day. Yes, we have to close business, but you're not going to close business unless you're prospecting. And unfortunately, it's the thing that sales reps like to do the least. Me too.
Yep.
It's kind of like going to the gym. Do you want to go to the gym? No, but if you want a good body, you go and you do reps or whatever you're going to do. And that's the price we pay to be able to meet with people and help them get involved with our products so that we can actually make money for ourselves and our company. I get asked this all the time by nervous sellers, and I'm betting you do too. People keep asking me, hey, Jeff, is AI going to put salespeople out of business? What are your thoughts on AI? And how do you think it's going to put us out of business? I think it may eventually, but no time soon. It still can't create a relationship. And how should salespeople be using AI today?
Great question. And I think it's on, you look at the stock market as being driven by AI companies. And if you watch the Super Bowl, we're taping this on February, but just a couple weeks ago, the Super Bowl was there. And there was, I think I counted 7 different AI companies running ads. So then you say to yourself, is it going to be like the .com bubble when they all ran ads? But that's a different story, different day. So I think AI is here to stay. And I think it's the phenomenal tool that you as a salesperson should use to build relationships. And you hit it on the head. First off is human to human is always going to be the way we will buy, probably at least for our generation and maybe our children's generation. They all said, hey, listen, websites, we're going to put salespeople out of business, and salespeople are still here, right? Chat bots are going to put salespeople out of business, and we're still here. We're like cockroaches, right? We keep on finding a way to sell products.
The telephone was going to put salespeople out of business.
I mean, so I've been around, unfortunately. So, but I do think it's a great tool, right? So is it going to put people out? No, but it's going to put the teams that use it are going to sell more faster and better. The teams that use it will shave hours off of their discovery because they'll know the right questions to ask and the qualifications and all the stuff that you need so you could prospect more. The teams that will use that will help create a really, really, really phenomenal prospecting list. And so I think you if it's not part of your toolbox, one is if you're a leader and it's not part of your team's toolbox, you're kind of, your mismanagement of the team, right? You're doing malpractice as a sales leader if you're not forcing them to think about these tools. Just from helping me craft compelling, short, succinct emails, right? Because I read some emails and they're cringy, right? To just doing really good discovery. I have some clients that are using it, and what I see them create for their sales team is just outstanding. It's phenomenal. The tools that are available and the richness of the synthesis of the diagnostics that AI could do, phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
So
you're giving the same answer that I'm giving, just about, which is I don't think AI is going to put sales out of business anytime soon, but the sales rep that embraces AI is going to outperform the sales rep that doesn't. And look, I'm an old guy, but I love technology.
I love it. I can't get it. I can't read enough books about it, and I can't study enough. I can't trial and error it enough, and I can't. So I think you have to be an adopter. But my guess is if you look at the people that you and I are same age-ish, right? We probably were early adopters for all technology, right? We were probably early cell phone adopters, right? And I think in sales, what's going to give you that edge is what you're looking for. But it's really, you go back to, you said it's a service mentality too, is how am I going to serve people better? And it's really through AI. Now, listen, there's hallucinations, right? It's still not 100% clean. You got to make sure that your salespeople aren't putting competitive and your strategic things into the chat GPT. You got to create a closed LLM. There's things you have to do as the business owner, the leader, the founder, somebody that's listening to this. But I think it's a game changer. It's a phenomenal
awesome.
Game changer.
A few months ago, you posted about the Spirit strategy.
Yeah.
So what is the Spirit strategy, and what can we learn from Spirit Halloween? I saw that on LinkedIn. I go, I got to ask him about this. It's great.
I love that. Right. So if you think about you think about a highly performing organization that is very, very, very profitable and very, very focused. It's Spirit, the Halloween stores. That's what we're referencing, not Spirit Airlines, because that's one. So Spirit, and it's really focusing on knowing your niche, really executing on your niche, knowing specifically and succinctly who you're going to serve, being extremely focused on profitability, and just driving through that ideal customer profile. Spirit shows up. I think they start showing up about a month or two before, right? They take over great leases, right? They say, listen, I'm going to be here and I'm only going to be here for 3 months. They drive down their cost of acquisition because their overhead is not as high, and they're just phenomenal executors. Now, I did read that they're getting into the Christmas space, so it will be interesting to be there. So if you are a business owner, I think you can learn more from outside of your businesses than inside your businesses. And that is just look at like the Spirit and just being hyper focused on serving a niche in a defined market, knowing and executing. They execute better than anybody that I possibly could see, right? You walk through some stores and they're empty. You walk through a Spirit and the stuff is there and it's 3 deep and it's clean and the staff is as trained as it possibly can. So it's a phenomenal business model. I would focus on it. I think their revenue per square foot, is double that or triple that of other retail, especially during that defined period, and their profit per square foot or per retail store is just phenomenal.
Amazing. What about scripts? Some people swear by scripts. Others say they're too constraining. They want to be able to think off the top of their head and react on their feet. And I think part of sales is being able to think on your feet. But scripts, no scripts. What do you think?
Scripts, yes. Guide rails, yes. Talking points, yes. All of it, yes. I think it just makes it better. Now, I'm not saying that, listen, a great script is created and written by screenwriters, but actors put them to life, right? Actors do improvisational. Actors kind of feel. You can't be robotic, right? That's AI answering the phone and being robotic. I think we're humans, and you just have to kind of ebb and flow. But I think a flow of a call, right? Opening rapport, needs analysis, all that stuff has to happen. So I think you need it. And listen, I think Cain and Abel, the two things that they fought about from the Bible really are sales qualified lead and marketing qualified lead. And should we use scripts or not use scripts? I think those are the two things that they fought about. We think it's something else, right? So since the dawn of time, we've been fighting about those things. And I think, listen, use them to the best of your ability. I don't like it doesn't let me be creative. And they're like, well, come on. George Clooney is creative, right? I just watched on the plane coming home, Deliver Me From Nowhere, the gentleman from The Bear. My guess is he improvised on that script and the flow of it, but there was a foundational script. So, I'm for him. I'm bullish.
Yeah. I always tell salespeople, as long as you don't lie, cheat, or steal, I don't care what you say or what you do, as long as you blow away your quota. But if you're not blowing away your quota, then you listen to a process. There's a reason why somebody like you or me helps people put together a script or a sales process, and that's because we know what works. Me personally, look, I'm a creative guy. I do stand-up comedy on the side, and I get plenty of creativity there. When I'm selling, I don't need to be creative. I've figured out over the years, here's what works. So I don't need to show how creative I am. I don't need to show how brilliant I am, because my goal is, how do I help the most amount of people that I want to work with choose to get involved with me? And if I need to follow a process to do that, I don't mind if somebody says it's not creative. In fact, for 3 years, I had a partner, and my job was to sell and then deliver training. His job was to get me leads and get me appointments, so I didn't have to deal with that. And he would come initially with me on sales calls. And after about 3 or 4, he turned to me and goes, "You are boring." I'm like, "I'm boring?" He goes, "No, you're not boring. You're not a boring person, but you're boring because you say the same thing every time." You know why? Because I've figured out what works. I don't need to come up with something new every time. I'm following a process.
We get bored with it before the prospects do, because they've never heard it before, right? So you got to figure out what works and keep on using it.
Exactly right. I'm scrambling quickly because I just took a look at the time, and I see we're quickly running out of time, and I want to make sure that we have time to share your information. So I'm going to come back to you, and I'm going to share my screen. While I'm doing that, Nick, this is going to be converted to a podcast, but for those who are watching live, I'm going to share my screen so they can see your contact information. But for those who will be listening, can you please share with them? Oh boy, here it is. There we go. Can you share with people, how can they get in touch with you if they're interested in working with you, finding out about what you do?
Yeah. So, our website is salesperformanceteam.com. So hit it up there. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. It's probably my communication vehicle of choice. So Nicholas Loise is where I'm at on LinkedIn. You can email me at nick@salesperformanceteam.com. If you have a recruiting need, or you as a salesperson want to know what your grit score is, go to yoursalesrecruiter.com. On there, we have all of our job postings, as well as there's some freebies on there. And then if you're a sales leader, a founder, anything like that, obviously, get with Jeff's group. But we've got some freebies for Jeff and his team and the people that listen here. They did such a phenomenal job of rolling out the red carpet. So go to salespack.salesperformanceteam.com. On there, we have, I think, an e-copy of one of the books I wrote, some checklists of some call reporting things, just things to make you better as a leader or as an individual producer.
Beautiful. And if you're looking for Nick on LinkedIn, Loise is Loise.
Sure. Yeah.
Nicholas Loise. And he's definitely somebody you should follow. I think he's got about 16,000 followers, people who are looking every day at what he's posting, because he's posting valuable content. And Nick, I hate to say this, but we are out of time. I could talk to you all day. Thank you so much for sharing your brilliance so generously. I really appreciate it. And I'll end as I always do. Gang, please remember, sales is a game of making things happen. Get out there and make sales happen. Have a great weekend, everybody. Have a great weekend, Nick. Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for all you do for sales professionals. Thank you for that Facebook group and having this podcast. It's phenomenal, and it's not easy, and your team was stellar.
You're looking at the team, my friend. Thanks, Nick.